gambling, it's like even if I went and I won a bunch of money, how much am I going to lose out on that to taxes? I'm going to lose a bunch of that on taxes. You know, gambling income is taxed. You're required to report that to the IRS. And that's more on my that's on my mind a lot more now, because I just recently filed my taxes for the first time. Segue into story. We'll talk about video games at some point. Just shh. I filed taxes for the first time at the ripe age of 23 years old. I figured that it would be a good time to do it, just because I literally got a tax form from a place that I did some contract work for. So I thought it's probably my best interest to act on that, and better be safe than sorry. So I don't know how the tax system works or filing works in other countries, but the way that it works in America is, well, it's interesting because the entire system is set up for people who aren't me, for people who are not named Taigen. Essentially, the tax system in America is pretty straightforward. It's a lot more straightforward, assuming that your income comes from like an employee-employer relationship, in which case you would get a form that's called a W-2. I do not have that. In fact, I have multiple income sources, none of which are from an employer. So, they just like don't know what to do about that, and the actual form that you would have to fill out, or any of the a lot of the services you could go to, are not helpful, and they just don't know how to handle you, which was you'd think that they would be better at. So, a couple things about the way that my finances work. I'm saying this because number one, it's interesting and I learned a lot. And it was a fascinating experience, and maybe this could be intriguing to someone else. So I have multiple income sources, and I have to be considered differently based off of what income source it is. So in regards to Patreon, my Patreon money, I am technically considered a business, because I am giving a product to people that they are subscribing to me for. They are paying me money for. In regards to my contract work, I'm a contractor. I do sporadic contract work and stuff like that when I can find it, every now and again, for just like little short one-off payments or a small series of payments sometimes. So in that regard, I am a contractor, and I fall under what's called a 1099 NEC for non-employer compensation. So here's the double-edged sword of the way that my finances work. So if you have a job, a regular job, and you have a boss who pays you, every time you get your paycheck, the taxes that you pay to the government are already taken out of that paycheck. They are taken out before you even get it. To the state and the federal government. And then what you're doing when you go to file your taxes at the end of the year is that you've given up X amount of money to the government in taxes over the course of the year. And then you go and you figure out, based off of your situation, basically like what little discounts you qualify for. Like, do you have changed based on like, are you married? Do you have dependents, like children that you live with or that depend on you financially? Do you qualify for this thing? Do you qualify for that? And then the government says, oh, okay, well, we actually only need this amount. We needed like $1,000 less from you. You got $1,000 less. We only needed $8,000 instead of $9,000 from you. And so they're like, okay, well, we'll give you the difference. We'll give you the $1,000 as a refund because we didn't actually need it. Haha, teehee. And that's why people get a big refund. And my mom is always excited for her tax refund. The income that I get from Patreon And from all of my contract work so far, it might change depending on like the employer, but so far I this is applied to every single contract job I've done. None of that income is taxed. Sorry, none of that income has taxes taken out of it. It is all untaxed at the point that I get it. So I don't pay taxes throughout the year. I do not pay taxes on every Patreon check that I get. I lose some of it to platform cuts. Some of it goes to Patreon. Some of it goes to PayPal. But I am not taxed on that income when I get it. That's one edge of this blade. Cool, yeah, I get the basically full value of my money, of the money that I earned. The other edge of the sword is that because I don't pay throughout the year, I have to pay in one lump sum at the end of the year, or I guess the beginning of the next year when tax season comes around. So, I've talked to a friend who suggested maybe filing quarterly because it can be kind of stressful. I can imagine it being kind of stressful to like have to calculate about how like have enough saved up for when I inevitably have to pay taxes at the end of the year. And it's a very unique, it's kind of a unique circumstance in terms of the system. So my brother, so here's the thing, because of that, I don't want to pay someone to do my taxes, right? Like, that's a negative investment. If I go and pay someone or I pay for some service to do my taxes for me, I guess I could have the peace of mind, but also like I'm like losing, I don't want to lose more money on it. So my brother was like, just go to TurboTax. They have a free option because my younger brother has had to pay taxes before because he's had a real job longer than me. And he's had a job where he's had to earn enough to pay taxes. And I said, okay, cool. So I went to TurboTax and I was like, I'll try this out. I went through the process and I got everything squared away. And then I get to the end where they review the process and they say, oh, you've actually got like 11 different lines that are missing fields. And I was like, what? What am I missing? So I go all the way back trying to find out what information I didn't fill in. And one of the first things they ask you is, do you have a W-2? You say no. I say no. And they say, cool, next step. Do you have money from savings from investments? And I'm like, I made like $1 in my savings account over the course of the year, I guess. And they're like, cool. And then I click away to the next part. Well, it turns out that the part that was missing was all of the stuff about my actual income. I just kind of figured that we would get to that eventually, and I was a little bit surprised when I got towards near the end of the process and I had not actually entered any information from any of the forms I'd gotten from any contractors or had to fill in anything I got from Patreon or anything like that. So it turns out that when they asked me if I'd made any money from investing, there was a button underneath that I'd sort of missed. I sort of skimmed over for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just blind. That's why I triple check everything when I'm doing this. That said, add more income sources. And I was like, oh, maybe that. And I click on it and it gives me a whole list of different types of income. One of them is 1099 NEC. And I say, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I want to. So I click on that one. I'm going to fill in that information. And they go, oh, so sorry to hear about that. If you want to have multiple income sources, that requires TurboTax Premium, which is $60. Sorry about that. Oh, sorry. And I was like, well, wait, so this is just completely useless if you don't have a W-2? Just genuinely? Like, if you, unless you literally, this is like how they're fucking scumbags and they get you to pay for their premium trial or premium version of whatever, is they make it as restrictive as possible so that if you have any income that does not fit specifically, like, well, do you have a W-2 and do you have investments? If you have anything besides that, if you did literally if you got like $2,000 because you did some contract work over the year, or you sold something as part of like a little small business on the side, impossible. You cannot file with them. I was like, well, fuck this. That's bullshit. So I'm kind of floundering for a bit, trying to figure out how I can actually file this. I go look up the actual 1040 form, which is the tax form. What you're doing when you go to these websites is you're just filling in information, and when you put the information in on the web page, it's just plugging that in to a 1040 automatically for you, just using more clear language to describe what you actually need. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh man, I do not feel comfortable filling this out myself. So I end up where else but the IRS website. And on the IRS website, they have a tool that you can use to find services to do your taxes. And they said you might even be able to get everything filed for free. And I was like, okay, well, fat chance at that. I just saw what TurboTax tried to pull. Any other company, I imagine they're going to be just as annoying about it. I end up putting in some information, and then they spit out 2 websites at me, one of which is Free Tax USA. And the rest of this podcast is dedicated to Free Tax USA, because I was actually able to file my taxes completely for free. I don't know if it's just because I qualified for a certain thing because I'm under a certain income level or whatever. But I got the whole thing filed for free. I got it sent out. I got to put in all of my income sources. I covered everything across the board, and it was easier. It was better laid out, and it was more clear, which I thought was crazy. Part of that could have just been that could have been assisted by the fact that I had already kind of been through the process one time with TurboTax. But going through it with Free Tax, I genuinely felt like they structured things in a way that was a lot easier to understand. And like I got done with all the important stuff like out of the way first, and then on to like what cuts and breaks can I get. So I did end up I don't want to say how much I paid in taxes. It wasn't a whole lot because I don't have a whole ton of personal income. But I will say that I think the funniest part of the process was when we got to business expenses. And I did get to write off buying Harvester as a business expense. Which I've mentioned that to people. Like I mentioned that to my mom, and she was like, really? And it's like, I mean, when I looked it up on their website, it is a business expense can be like, if you bought pens for your office, if you bought like pens as office supplies, that's a business expense. Well, I'm like, okay, well, shit. I mean, my business revolves around making videos. I bought a game to make a whole video about for a whole month. That seems like a business expense to me. So I finally get to live the dream of writing off video games as business expenses on my taxes. Not that it was, I got it on sale for like $2 because I was like, ooh. And I already owned it on GOG, so I felt kind of stupid for buying it again. But I guess I just own it twice now. I forgot I owned it on GOG. So it was a completely minuscule amount. I just did it to have fun. It was just kind of fun to be able to say that I did that. So shout out to Free Tax USA for saving my bacon and making it genuinely a lot easier and for doing it for actually free. Thank God.